Okay, just wanted to film a little video here, not to be confrontational or controversial, but because it is a subject that people have asked me about and seem to be kind of genuinely curious about. So I started out with the dictionary definition of atheism, and it's basically a disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods, from the Greek atheos, without God. So atheism doesn't mean lack of morals or lack of right and wrong. It just means the lack of enforcement from a higher power. So you can still believe that, like, stealing is bad because you wouldn't want somebody to steal from you, so you don't steal from other people. And that's even barring the fact that there is a worldly punishment, like going to prison. You just recognize that it's not really the right thing to do. And you don't have to believe that there's some God up there that's going to punish you and make you burn in hell forever. So when I was 4 years old, I did go to Sunday school. And I remember going many times. I think that had to do more with my grandma than it did my actual parents, because I didn't actually start going to church until I was 8. So for like 4 years between the time I was 4 and 8, barely went to church, maybe on Christmas. But as a young kid, my mom was actually breeding sled dogs. So she had this book on evolution, and she was trying to learn about, like, hereditary genetics. So when she was breeding these sled dogs, she could come up with, like, the optimal mix of genetic traits. And I loved animals growing up. And there was lots of pictures in this book. And there was actually a lot of very scientific technical terms as well. It's definitely not a children's book. But she gave it to me to look at the pictures, and after a while, I would ask her, like, well, what does it say underneath the picture? And my mom's like, you would never understand what that says. I'm like, well, just tell me. And she'd humor me and read it, and yeah, most of the time I didn't understand it. I was like 4 or 5 years old, but I did enjoy it, and it actually was the book that ultimately kind of taught me how to read, along with, like, Dr. Seuss and other stuff. So at a very young age, I did actually understand evolution to a degree. And people could say, well, that's why the devil got to you before God did. But I was going to Sunday school at the same time. And also, I know plenty of other unbelievers that never learned about evolution. So whether or not that had anything to do with anything, I don't know. But I thought it was interesting because I still do have that book. So yeah, I started to go to church with my parents when I was 8, and it was probably about 6 months in, and I noticed there were some inconsistencies with what the priest was saying. And I asked my parents, I said, okay, 3 weeks ago the priest was saying this, and then this week he said this, so which one am I supposed to believe? Which one am I supposed to do? Because they don't jive together. My parents, like, we don't remember the sermon from a couple weeks ago. We don't even remember this sermon, really. And so you're going to have to talk to the priest. So I did. I went and talked to the priest, and he really didn't remember his sermon from a couple weeks ago either. He had to get his notes out, and he's like, oh, okay, that's my sermon from a couple weeks ago. And he tried to kind of make it work or give me at least somewhat of an answer, but it wasn't a very good one. So I just chalked it up. Okay, he doesn't know. It's an inconsistency. Should be troubling for most people. And then in the next 6 months, this happened 2 more times. Exactly the same way. I would go to my parents and say, okay, he just said this. Now he's saying this. Which one am I supposed to believe? They tell me to ask him. I do. He gives me a lackadaisical response. And so after the 3rd one, I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm not going to church anymore. My parents were like, well, you're not going to stay home. I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what's going to happen. I'll do homework. Maybe I'll go to a friend's house, whatever you guys are comfortable with, but I'm not going to church anymore. And we fought about it for a little bit, but ultimately, they couldn't really force me to go. So I did just end up staying home. And from the time I was about 9 till probably I was about 16, religion just never really came up. I didn't believe. Maybe around Christmas time, family members would ask, and I'd just kind of dodge the subject. And when I started to get in high school, you start to learn about religion and history a little bit more, and if you're already kind of opposed to it, you can really understand when you're learning things, you're like, this is really not good. But it still didn't come up much, and a lot of my friends weren't religious. It was fine. But, as you get older, people start asking you, oh, you're an adult now, you're going to go to church? What church are you going to go to? And I'm like, I'm not going to go to church. I don't believe in any of that stuff. So people would say, oh, well, you're going to burn in hell, and aren't you afraid of what God's going to do to you? And stuff like that. And it's condescending. And if you're a non-believer, for somebody to say that, that's like threatening them, like my imaginary friend is going to beat you up, or Santa Claus isn't going to bring you presents, or the tooth fairy is not going to take your tooth. It's like, that's just really patronizing to say stuff like that. So about the time I was 17, I decided that I was going to read the Bible and really understand it, because I still had a memory of the sermons that I had heard, and I'd seen a few verses here and there throughout the years, and enough to solidify, what I already knew. But I really did want to understand it well. So I actually went to the same church and took a Bible from the church that I went to as a kid, because I wanted to make sure I was getting the correct word of God. I didn't want somebody to be able to say, oh, well, you bought that Bible at a bookstore. That's not the real Bible. So I got it directly from the church, from the source. And I read it cover to cover. And there is tons of stuff in there that I was like, yep, that's why I don't believe in this stuff. And that's not to say there's not good stuff in the Bible, because there is. The verse about do unto others as you would have done to yourself, and the love of money is the root of all evil, stuff like that. I mean, there is good stuff in there. So I don't throw everything out, but there's so much dogma and so much just bad stuff about, slavery and, beating your slave, and women are not allowed to have authority over a man, which is why you've never seen a female pope or cardinal. And even female priests up until about 100 years ago were unheard of. So there's just stuff like that where I was like, yeah, that's why I don't like this stuff. But even after I learned, I still didn't really talk about religion much unless somebody really pushed it on me. And that's basically my kind of belief system in a way, is people can believe whatever they want. Like, I don't expect everybody to be an atheist. Like, if you want to be a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Christian or a Muslim, whatever, I don't really care, as long as you don't push your beliefs onto other people. And an example of that would be, like, Jews and Muslims aren't allowed to eat pork. God said that it's a filthy animal, even though God created pigs. But apparently he created them to be filthy, so they're not allowed to eat them, which is fine. If they don't want to eat them, they don't have to. But I don't believe in what they do, so I'm allowed to eat bacon all I want. And I'm allowed to, touch a dead pig. I can do whatever I want. So as long as people keep their beliefs to themselves, I'm mostly okay with it. I mean, you can believe in aliens, you can believe in paganism, you can believe in Scientology. I don't even care. Just don't expect me or anybody else to believe the same things you do. And I guess one of the last things is I get people who say, well, you can't disprove God. Like, you can't prove God doesn't exist. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I also can't prove that Bigfoot doesn't exist or the Loch Ness Monster. People see those things all the time. Thousands of sightings a year. Nobody can find one. Nobody's ever seen a dead body, but people see them. Same thing with aliens. I can't prove aliens don't exist. So my lack of belief in God just comes from the fact that I have no evidence that God exists. And I've also read his book twice, and the Quran, which is just basically a shortened version of the Bible. And I don't agree with them, and I don't like them. So even if I have met God, I'm not a fan. So yeah, maybe there is a God. Maybe God exists. Maybe I'm going to be wrong and whatever. But if I was a betting man, I would put my money on probably not. So that's just kind of a quick little story of how kind of my belief system came to be and why I am the way I am. Sometimes I do get a little hard on religion and I'll poke fun at religion a little bit, but that's just because I have a lot of knowledge about it. In fact, before I go, I'll show you these books. So, the Complete Bible Handbook, an illustrated companion, the Holy Bible, the one I actually took from the church that I went to, Battles of the Crusades, and the Quran. So I know religion and I know religious history really well. And I have no problem discussing it. In fact, some of my really good friends are pastors. So I can talk about religion all day long. And so yeah, I do poke fun at it from time to time, but that's because I know it pretty intimately and I just want to let people know what the Bible actually says. And if I come off as kind of a jerk doing it, sorry. It'll happen from time to time. So I hope this hasn't been too rambling, and I hope it's answered some questions for people and that they found it somewhat interesting. All right, bye.